The question of what should be done by people or communities that face challenges of human-wildlife conflict has remained debatable. According to a study by Zimbabwe Environmental Lawyers Association, the number of human-wildlife conflicts cases rose by nearly 300% between 2016 and 2021, from 619 to 1,598. By the end of May, there had been already more than 60 fatalities in human-wildlife confrontations in Zimbabwe. A total of 72 lives were lost to the human-wildlife conflicts. Welcome to People and Earth today. We have an expert in wildlife law from Speak Out for Animals, Takuzwa Nzo, and one of our bird conversationists, Gary Staffords from Quimbashiri. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Let's start with our conversationist in the studio today. Gary, please can you walk us through the experience that you've had since you live in an abundance of flora and fauna?
Well, firstly, it's a real privilege to be here because I often feel that our flora and fauna have been forgotten for greed and for human habitation. I live at Lake Chivera, and I've been involved with bird life for the last 40 years. So I think I've got a pretty good background on that. My field of expertise is, of course, birds, and also the wetlands that lead from Harare into Lake Chivera. And Lake Chivera is a very important thing because that's exactly where the water comes from that sustains the whole of Harare. The problem that we're facing, of course, is the negative impact on wildlife around Chivera and also the wetlands. You know, I drove through Bluff Hill, Mablerain yesterday, and all the wetlands are now covered in houses. If you look at it, those were sacred areas before, but now there's houses everywhere. In fact, there's so many houses, there's no area for roads. Where have all the birds, where have the snakes gone that used to occupy those areas? They've had no choice but to move into the dwellings and so on. So that is a big problem for the wetlands. Also at Chivera, we have the main problem is it is a national park area. Unfortunately, there's a lot of tree chopping going on, so there's competition between humans and bird life and animal life. The tree chopping goes on, destroying bird habitat. The fishing that's going on, there used to be 2 fishing companies, and now there's 40. So from 23 species of fish, we're down to 3 species because of human greed taking the fish. Because of that, we're finding the crocodiles are now biting people. And then you put it down as a crocodile problem on people. Well, the problem is people have eaten all the fish. The crocs have got no food. Now that is a problem. So we mustn't blame the croc, we must blame the people for taking all the fish out of the lake, and the crocs are now looking for food. So when we look at it, the more people we're having and they're coming into the urban areas, the more bird life and wildlife are displaced. We need to remember that having birds in your area, around your garden, is an indication of a healthy environment. When the birds move out, it means that there's problems. And if you look around Harare, you'll see millions and millions of crows. Why are the crows there? Because they're eating the garbage left by people. Some of the ideas that we have. The netting problem, well, Chivera was very, very rich in fish, in wildlife. And we used to have international fishing competitions there. And because of indiscriminate netting, poaching and so on, the fish populations have definitely collapsed. We're living in a critical time. On top of it, unfortunately, areas around Chivera have been leased out and they become nightclubs. So people that are wanting to party now go out to Chivera, party all night, and that also disrupts not just the bird life, but also the people that are living around there, because now it's become a party venue instead of a wildlife area. So these are some of the issues that we have out there.
Wow, that's an interesting information that you've given us. So would you say that animal infringement is on human lives, or is it vice versa?
No, it's definitely humans on animal life. If you look at, we've got areas that are set aside for human habitation and also for wildlife areas. And I think a lot of the wildlife conflict we have is when humans are going into and infringing on the animal areas, and people then get hurt. Nobody's really controlling people going into wildlife areas for poaching and so on. And what I found is, because my passion has always been birds, what I found now, and vultures in particular, is that there's a lot of people in the rural areas are using dogs for hunting, and they go and they hunt wild animals, and some of the dogs have now gone feral. But now you're getting some other farmers who come along, want to do some agriculture, maybe sheep or goats or cattle, and those dogs are now attacking their wildlife, their domestic animals. So what they're doing now is they're poisoning a carcass to kill the jackals and dogs. Unfortunately, and we had a case only a year ago where over 100 vultures were poisoned in Featherston. I think 70 were dead. We rescued 50. And we managed to get them back to health and release them. But people are poisoning carcasses so to kill dogs and jackals, etc. But birds are getting involved. You may say, well, what's the point of a vulture? Vultures are very important because in the environment, an animal may die of anthrax or rabies or something like that. Vultures are designed in such a way so that if they eat the meat from an animal like that, it won't be transmitted to other animals and through the wind. So anthrax on the ground can easily spread with the wind and then affect other animals. So vultures are being killed because of poisoning. One of the big things I see that we need to do is educate people to what I call stupidstition.
Oh, okay.
It's a mixture of stupidity and superstition.
Yeah.
Every culture has got stupidstition. Us Mobunus, we think if an owl lands on your roof, somebody old will die. Unfortunately, a lot of the black Africans think that the owls are associated with witchcraft.
That's so true, though. I mean, a lot of people do believe that.
They do believe that.
Yeah? Wouldn't you say you also believe in that superstition, or you think it's legit correct?
Well, I don't believe in that, but I know my parents do.
Okay.
So maybe it's because I have learned a few things as I grow, but generally people tend to think that if you have a vulture head, you can see the future. So you can become a prophet, or you can become a traditional healer if you just have that.
Okay. Well, I'll hold you guys on that thought. We're going to take a short commercial break and we'll be right back. We'll be right back, guys. Welcome back to People and Earth. We were talking to Gary, sharing his experience with the animals and the conflict with the humans. Human-wildlife conflict occurs when the needs and behavior of wildlife impact negatively on humans, or when humans negatively affect the wildlife.
So glad you brought the subject up of vulture heads as muti. But a lot of people don't realize that some people believe it eat the feet of the vulture and the heart, or of a bird of prey, that you can become very brave or very powerful. So there is a big area there that needs to be addressed. And I've been doing, well, my family been doing research on birds of prey for the last 40 years. And we found recently, especially last 2 or 3 years, where people have literally gone and burnt down huge gum trees where eagles, crowned eagles, have been nesting for decades, and black sparrowhawks as well, for this muti trade. But also the conflict where those birds are now catching chickens and so on, because all their other food has been caught, trapped, or whatever, and the birds of prey now are taking chickens and sheep and so on. So now they have been killed because of humans moving into their areas.
Oh wow, that is really sad actually. So let us hear from our legal expert, Takuzo Nzo. Maybe you can shed some light. You are from Speak Out for Animals. So please kindly share with us your experience of the issues pertaining to the wildlife.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Like you said, I'm from Speak Out for Animals, and we mainly focus on trying to protect animals. So we look at animal welfare and animal rights. Okay, so today we are talking about wildlife and wildlife conflict. The first thing that you need to understand is that we have various legal acts that protect wildlife, and for the purposes of human and wildlife conflict, the main acts would be the Parks and Wildlife Act and the Protection of Wildlife Indemnity Act. So these two acts, they work hand in hand to try and ensure that humans can have access to wildlife as a natural resource, and at the same time we have the Parks and Wildlife Management Authority that is there to then protect the wildlife so that it does not get extinct. Yes. So now, since there is human interaction with wildlife, then there is bound to be conflict because humans are now encroaching into wildlife space. So for that reason now, we need to then understand what the Parks and Wildlife Act says with regards to how to handle and how to mitigate issues relating to wildlife, human-wildlife conflict. Yes.
Wow, that certainly does explain everything to do with the legal issues. So can you actually tell us, when it comes to these baboons, I mean, they can be quite notorious, and what other categories are there that involve the issues pertaining the human-wildlife conflicts?
Okay. The Parks and Wildlife Act creates three main categories of wildlife. We have what is known as specially protected animals. These are animals that are near extinction and therefore they need more protection. Then we also have what are regarded as dangerous animals. These are animals that if they interact with humans, there is bound to be serious injuries and possibly death. And then we have what are categorized as problem animals. These are animals that do not pose a life-threatening effect on humans, but can be a nuisance, like baboons. So a very good example of problem animals is a baboon. A very good example of a dangerous animal is a hippopotamus or an elephant. A very good example of a specially protected animal is a pangolin.
So Gary, tell us, as a conservationist, how would you help with this situation that's happening around the wildlife sector? What would you actually implement to help ease the situation?
I think number one is education. And I've been doing that for 30 years at Queen Bashiri, educating children especially, because as we know, Sukuru, Mbuya have got their ideas, and to change it is very, very difficult. So educating kids on the real things about wildlife, and also law enforcement. The law is only as strong as the people who want to implement it. You can have, and we've got all the wildlife policies, we've got all the wetland policies, dating back decades and decades. But our enforcers tend to forget about it. It's easier to do that. So we need law enforcement and education. But education first and law enforcement to make sure people adhere to the regulations. We mentioned baboons, etc., as problem animals. They are problem birds. There's quelea. That's a problem bird. They eat huge amounts of wheat fields. Crowned cranes, they can go in certain areas like Chosholo, and literally 300 of them will eat all the maize fields. We have owls. owls, people are petrified of owls, and we're constantly getting called out to help people with owls. But owls are there to eat rats and mice.
Okay. So
That's why they're
you
there.
actually take those owls and move them to your shelters?
What we do is we breed owls and give them to people that are educated,
Okay.
and we release them at schools and on farms, factories, and they will control the rat populations in a natural way. We've been doing that for decades and decades. We were the first in Africa to do the owl projects. And we get people to put a box up, and the owls will then live in there. And I always laugh. I always say it's very good for black Africans to have owls around, because then you keep the Tutsis away.
So are people receptive to it now? Are they open
They're
to the
getting
idea?
much more people are getting much more receptive now. Yes, very exciting. Yeah.
All right. Wow. Thank you for that information. So we're going to take another short commercial break.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you just now. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the show. So we're chatting here with Gary and Takuzwa, and they're giving us insightful information on the human-wildlife conflicts. So tell us, I want to hear your people's perspective. And is there any way we can sort of protect ourselves in terms of the human nature and obviously protecting the animals at the same time? How do we balance this?
Okay. If you look at the Parks and Wildlife Act, particularly from Section 61 to Section 64, you will see that the legislatures tried to give us ways to try and mitigate and to ensure that there is less human-wildlife conflict. So as I stated earlier, that we have three main types of wildlife. So the procedures of handling human-wildlife conflict is dependent on which type of animal that you have encountered with. So for problem animals, if let's say an animal comes into your farm and attacks you or something happens, then there's conflict, and you retaliate, or maybe you try to protect yourself from that attack from the animal, you are required by law to as soon as possible report the case to the nearest authority. And if the nearest authority is far away, you then call parks or the police or the district, the rural district council, so that at the very least the authorities are aware of what is happening, and then they can come in and pitch in and see how best to deal with the matter. So for problem animals, the requirement is you report as soon as possible, or latest within 7 days.
Okay, but are people actually abiding by the law of what is required in terms of your section?
The problem is people are not privy to what the law says. But as you have seen from reports, you can see that people are actually reporting human-wildlife conflict cases, which means they are somewhat appreciating the importance of actually reporting the cases, so that the relevant authorities can then now pitch in and see how best to mitigate this conflict.
Okay, so
Yes.
when it comes to the knowledge of having to get this insightful information, are there people that don't know the information at all, or there are some people that need to be obviously guided and educated on this?
Well, I can say maybe 20% of Zimbabweans are privy to this, and as you know, most of the larger part of Zimbabwe is rural, so many people tend to interact with our wildlife, but they do not know how to interact with them, and they do not know how to deal with the conflict.
Okay.
So our organization has tried to ensure that people are made aware of these laws. So we conduct campaigns, and sometimes we do teachings and trainings, so that people can actually have an understanding of these laws.
All
Yes.
right, so let me give this one to Gary now so that we can hear his perspective. Yeah, you've given us an overdose.
I think in most cases, people will dodge the law because they just want to get rid of the problem. So they'll kill something, hide it, and it's done with. And unfortunately, the law is in no position to prosecute people like that. I come from a different angle, more on a human angle, because I love to educate kids, especially about animals. Very often I find the parents are the problem. The parents will say, don't go near it, don't do this, don't do that. And they create a fear in the children. And when you got fear, you don't have respect or love. I like to take people up, let them interact, and then they can see that animals and birds have personalities. They got likes and dislikes. They can communicate. We discussed this earlier.
Yeah,
we can
that's
communicate. Right. And I want people, and especially urban kids don't come across chickens anymore. We need them to get out and form a bond, a respect and a love for our natural heritage.
Wow.
If you form a love and a bond for your natural heritage, the law will automatically follow. And I just think it's very important to get these people in touch with wildlife. And we've been trying to get people to come out to Chivera or anywhere. It doesn't matter where it is. Doesn't cost any money. Go and walk around the bush. Look at the birds in the trees. Look at what animals that there might be. Look at the grasses and get parents to start teaching their kids. The parents, unfortunately, stick a kid in front of a TV or a cell phone or a screen and say, occupy yourself, I'm going playing.
Yeah, it's nowadays, time's moving with the world, where people are just stuck on their tabs and things like that. But I like the fact that you've actually mentioned education.
Yes.
So this is where we start in terms of educating people, and it is good. It's a good thing that you're doing. So Mr. Nzo, tell us, in a nutshell, what programs are you doing?
We are also doing education. And we are also focusing on students. Currently, we have about 4 clubs at different high schools in Harare. And we also have a club at the University of Zimbabwe and at Great Zimbabwe University, whereby we are trying to make sure that everyone knows and appreciates that animals have feelings. Animals are sentient beings, they have families, and we need to treat them with respect, because just like you have your own family. If your family is attacked, then you'll be provoked and then there'll be conflict. So if we then first appreciate that animals are sentient beings, then we will improve on our relationship with them and the conflict will then be minimized. That's one of the things that we are doing. We also work with prosecutors and magistrates when we are doing case monitoring. So when there is a case, be it wildlife or a domestic animal case, we then monitor it to make sure that the prosecutors are privy to what they should do and the police are privy to what they should do. We are just there to assist them. They are our friends. So we will be helping each other to say, but what if we do it this way? What if we do it this way? So those are some of the things that we are doing to make sure that we protect wildlife, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So Gary, I know that you're doing conservation programs. May you kindly highlight for us what it is all about?
Well, I was very happy with what you said about taking care of the animals. When God created man, he gave us a job. The first job, he said, go name the animals and subdue the earth. Look after it, not exploit it. Enjoy it. And that's, for me, it's been always a commission to do. But yeah, we've done for the last 30, in fact 40 years, educating kids on wildlife. We've also did the Death by Plastic campaign. We started that in 2014. And with a young friend of mine, Jean Bertrand, from the African Youth Initiative on Climate Change, he raised 300 volunteers to clear up the plastic and the fishing nets around Chivera. We moved over 40 tons of plastic the first time. So we've had annual cleanups since then. And then, of course, during COVID, I came up with an idea, the Chivera Challenge. And the Chivera Challenge is about what I said earlier on, getting people to come from the urban areas out into Kamusha. Come and enjoy the mountains. Come and enjoy walking in the hills. And then hopefully you'll start getting an appreciation for the beauty of Zimbabwe. We've got a beautiful country.
We do.
We just don't seem to be able to manage it properly.
Yeah.
So we've done the Chivera Challenge, and we've also now created 3 big fish ponds because the fish in Chivera have disappeared. Kids are coming out, and what I'm trying to do is get them to learn to bank angle as recreation, not just netting, bank angle. When they catch a decent sized fish, learn how to clean it, cook and cook it. That's something seems to have disappeared in our culture, is enjoying wildlife even that way.
So Gary, I'm going to have to hold you up on that one and then catch you on another episode. So thank you guys for joining us on the show. Hopefully we will get to another episode where you can explain and expand on more of your information. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you join us next week, same place, same time. Goodbye.